growing up, we used to believe that the size of a toy was directly proportional to age. That is, the older you become, the bigger the size of your toy. But that has since been overtaken by technology, especially the advent of artificial intelligence. My favorite toy, or the toy that I could afford or have, was the ordinary, or the common brick. We would imitate buses, driving up ant hills, down dongas, until the brick cracks into two, because we were not born privileged like War KG and Ruadzano.
Nakafitwe. I don't even know what to look at it. I don't even know what I'm doing right now. Am I even doing it right? I mean, I think you do it like this. This one. How about my birthday? Yeah. Yes. Hey. Is this the Harley Davidson the helmet? Yeah. So yeah, we're about to just go out there. So I'm just gonna introduce you guys to the bike and the man who drives the bike.
Where's my mask? Sooner rather than later, I had to graduate from the common brick, and the obvious toy would have been the bicycle or a tricycle. Unfortunately, I could not get one since my parents could not afford. But I was very envious of my friends who could ride, both boys and girls. So what did I do? I had to hitch a plan. I then went to the local grocer's shop and hired myself as a delivery boy. The owner was really excited because I told him, no, you don't have to pay me anything for that. So he was happy, but little did he know that I could not ride. So, he had a huge bike, which they called the order bike then. It had a cage in front where they would put their groceries when they go to order, or when someone buys groceries from them, they would put the groceries inside there, and the delivery boy would deliver to whatever address. So what I could do was get the grocery, put in the cage, but it was usually milli-meal, 10 kg, 20 kg, of milli-meal. Then I would put it in that cage and push this bicycle all the way to the given address. It was only then after delivering, going back to the shop, that's when I would learn how to ride a bicycle. It was a very difficult exercise because I didn't have anyone to hold the bicycle for me in order to get on it or to balance it for me so that I can start riding. But I tried. However, the most challenging part, for somebody who is learning to ride, was that I could, turn the handlebars because of the cage which continued to face forward, and then you're turning the handlebars, and you don't see the wheel, mind you. You continue, so that the cage will face the direction that you want to go. The next thing, you find yourself on the ground, falling.
Hi ladies. Hi ma'am.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, and you?
Good.
Hello.
This scar, which you see here, is a result of one of the falls. It was very painful and it took quite some time to heal. But that did not deter me from continuing to learn how to cycle. So I continued and mastered how to ride a bicycle. That's the story of how I learned how to cycle. But prior to that, I had got a ride on one of my neighbors. He had a bicycle, and we had gone away for a long time. And when I came back, my mother was very furious, and she gave me a good hiding. we were riding through busy streets, and my friend's bicycle did not have a carrier at the back, and I had to sit between the handlebars on one and his saddle on the other end, right on the frame. My mother thought that was very, very dangerous, and that's why she was really mad. Despite all that, I went on to buy this beautiful bike. Just listen to my daughter Ruwadzano describe it.
So, guys, this is the Harley Davidson V-Rod. Okay.
It's a very beautiful bike, and it makes me smile all the time when I look at it. There are two things which make a biker smile. First and foremost is his bike. Riding a Harley Davidson, it's something really, really good. And then the second thing is good roads. These bikes are not designed to ride or to move in dirty roads or to scramble in the bush. They are designed to give you a smooth, beautiful, wonderful ride. Therefore, seeing good, well-maintained roads, that brings joy and makes any biker smile. When all the road users are driving or riding in well-marked, well-maintained roads, that in itself, it's a wonderful feeling. Prior to buying my motorbike, the first thing which I got was this helmet. It was just a helmet, a military helmet. A friend of mine who gave me this said it's probably from the Cuban army, which was fighting in Angola, because it also fought in that bush war when the Cubans were assisting Angola, and they were fighting against South Africa then. So he gave me this helmet. It wasn't covered in leather as you see it, but it was all metal. Then I initially, before covering it in leather, I had it painted still in black and white, as you can see in that picture. From that time, I knew that I was going to own a bike.
So this is my dad. As y'all know, he's a daredevil. So he's just putting on his regalia now. It's actually pretty long process. So he's just gonna start with like the face mask now. As you can see, it's Harley Davidson. Then he's putting on the goggles now. He looks pretty scary. Pretty scary. Pretty scary. This is actually like one of my favorite helmets. It's like so old school. So like that's his regalia, you guys. This is like so cool. This is so cool. Do you want to say hi to the viewers?
Hi.
Yep. So this is like the final look. That's the final look, guys.
I got married and I was blessed with 2 children, a boy and a girl. And the first thing that I did for my son was to buy him a bicycle, because I didn't want him to grow up and experience the kind of life that I had lived. And you can see in these pictures that he's enjoying his cycling. There are times when they would visit the Gweru showgrounds, when there's an agricultural show and there are police displays. They would also get an opportunity to ride on top of a motorbike, because I had started to like riding. There were not so many bikes during our time, and I used to see motorbikes being advertised in magazines, the Kawasaki brand, the Honda brand. That's KG there with a favorite helmet, that big oversized helmet, and a bag at the back, and imitating a rider. She's really enjoying herself. And look at her legs. Beautiful. And if you were to look closely at your mother's home, you would notice that your yet to be born sibling is leaping with joy as the sister is enjoying herself. Oh, what a lovely sight. Hopefully both of them are going to be excellent riders, really excellent riders. If it starts at this age, then definitely it's a definite yes. Oh, lovely KG, thank you. I would also like to pay a special tribute to other road users, especially motorists and truck drivers, who always pave way for bikers, to allow them to pass through. That is really something I find special, and I would like to thank all drivers who notice riders and bikers. Thank you so much. And riding is not about talking. It's about sound. Let's hear the sound.
So, you know, you need to be sitting down.
Let's do the fairest rider while they are pleased. The fairest rider, female and female. The fairest rider. The fairest rider, we're gonna close. The fairest rider, if you are not coming, we're gonna close. Female and male, she's here, no problem. We're waiting for a male. Female and male. The fairest rider, no problem. Thank you, no problem. If you, no problem. Judges, we still honor you. Please, my leaders, thank you very much. Much now. Now, the fairest rider and male.
The master of ceremony reminds me of my longest ride, which I partook from Copperleaf to Gweru in the Midlands province of Zimbabwe. I left Copperleaf around 1 p.m. and what an awkward time to start such a long road trip. But I planned that I should start really early. So when I was about to start in the morning, I couldn't find my keys. They just vanished. I looked for them all over, but I couldn't find them. I went to the office. I went, to town and all sorts of places trying to get the keys. I finally got the spare keys. But I guess somebody who was against the idea of me taking such a long ride must have hidden the keys. But I was determined to ride, to go all the way to Zimbabwe. I arrived at the border, the South African side, around 5 in the evening.
It's all about house music. It's all about house music.
It was also quite interesting to see people walking across the bridge with their luggage, showing that they are going back home to Zimbabwe after buying their groceries and foodstuffs from South Africa. Something which is rarely talked about, which the mainstream media will never mention. Most of the time we would hear of people crossing, through illegal crossing points into South Africa, daring the crocodile-infested river and coming illegally into South Africa. But I was surprised to see, hordes of people, large numbers of people, crossing the bridge on foot. Most of them going towards Zimbabwe, which means that people who really come legally into South Africa on foot and go back to their homes. So that was an eye-opener and a narrative which needs to be pursued. 6 o'clock in the evening, I was leaving the Bedbridge border post, and the security who were manning the gate advised me against riding, at night. They advised me to, find accommodation, sleep over, and then proceed the next day. I was so determined. One must be a rider in order to understand the feeling that I had, because I wanted to really find out how long it was going to take me to ride from Pretoria to Gweru. So I didn't listen to their advice. The other reason why I didn't listen was that I knew very well that my ancestors would protect me. I know how efficacious African spirituality is. If protection does not come from our ancestors, then it comes from the confidence that we have in them. They warned me of wild animals that are all over, along the Bedbridge-Bulawayo Road, and also stray domestic animals, especially donkeys. And everybody knows how these donkeys are. What these officers were, telling me was actually the absolute truth. Zimbabwe is awash of wild animals, all sorts of wild animals that you can think of. But unfortunately, the roads are not protected from these wild animals, which will be crossing willy-nilly, along the way, because the boundary fences are not maintained, and that's very dangerous. And not to mention abandoned trailers and slow-moving traffic that I might encounter along the way. Also the level rail crossings. And riding, at night with one light on, it was very dangerous. And also, there was heavy traffic, heavy-duty traffic, the buses and lorries, they normally travel during that time of the day. But I was going to do it anyway, so I took off. form of motivation was that I knew very well that along the way I was creating my own story, and not just my story, but also stories for other road users, those that I was going to come across, those that I was going to overtake. They would obviously have stories to talk about. Some would think that I was being or I'm being suicidal, while others would think that I've gone bonkers, while others will definitely admire my courage and make out stories. I derive a lot of utility from stories, storytelling, reading, so it was worthwhile, very worthwhile. Driving or riding in Zimbabwe is always full of police drama because the roads are full of roadblocks. When I was 10 kilometers away from the city center of Gweru, I was stopped at a police checkpoint. There I was issued with a ticket for failing to put or display a reflective material at the back of my bike. I tried to argue that, look, this is a South African registered bike and it must adhere to South African laws. I looked at the back of my bike, confused and wondering where exactly would I place the red tag without affecting the light configuration. The indicators, the stop lights, they're all cramped on that little, reflective lens. I was really, really confused. It was all in vain. I paid the spot fine and proceeded. Arrived in Gweru, I think it was about 10:30. Yeah, 10:30. That's the time that I, arrived in Gweru. So it was exciting. I pushed myself to the limit, and I showed a lot of resilience. And really it paid off, and the good thing of it is that it was a happy ending. I didn't get injured, and my lovely bike took me all the way. It was so faithful, and I love the bike. I am attached to it.
Yes, Baba!
Hey, how's it?
You play a good rhythm for people to vote for you to say they like how you played it. You are the winner. Same applies to the group. If they are a group, they play it nicely. The crowd says yes, they are winners. No problem.
But what about me?
You are not sharp. Don't worry. My leader, you have fair and square. It's a slogan. Slogan meaning if they are four, they play it nicely together. It's together. You are one, you are one. Okay, so switch on. Switch on. Switch on. Slogan. Let me explain again. My leader, a slogan, that means you play. Thanks, my leader. So let's go. I will.
Next day, after my arrival, I had drawn enough attention. I remember my nephew, Arthur, telling me that when he had overheard some of his college mates, because he was studying at the local polytechnical college, discuss about my Harley Davidson, he had sought to inform them that the bike belonged to his uncle. In response, his friends rebuked him and accused him of name dropping in order to get some respect. I realized I had conquered the city. That same evening, I was invited to Mtapa police station. 2 police officers came to my house and told me that the member wanted to speak to me. I wrote to the police station, and upon arrival, I was led into the officer in charge's office. He was a tall, dark man with curious eyes, and he was sitting behind his desk. He immediately introduced himself, and before I could introduce myself, he went on to recite his own citation. He told me that he had just concluded a serious murder case where people had been locked up in a house and were burnt, or fire was set alight and they were burnt beyond recognition. And the perpetrators, he had successfully apprehended them and they were now doing life imprisonment. He said he has got very good crime investigating skills. And he also reminded me that South Africa and Zimbabwe enjoyed good relationships, and they were both members of Interpol. So if anyone commits crime in Zimbabwe or vice versa, the police, they work hand in hand. So I listened attentively. He then went on to ask me about my name and my passport number, my address in South Africa. At that point, I then asked him if I was under investigations. He said, no, it was just a formality. Since if someone, just comes into the area and raises our interest, we normally do such routine checkups. I would have asked him if I could bring my lawyer, but I didn't want to complicate any issues because I didn't have anything to hide or to be afraid of. So I gave him my details as asked. I also told the officer that I was a government critic and a former councillor of the ward which he is currently presiding as officer in charge. I told him of my book, Gukura Wundi Ideology, why Zimbabwe is in crisis, and he said he didn't know anything about the book, he never heard anything of the book. And then I told him, look, you can find out. So that was my encounter. That was part of my script at Tapa police station. When I returned later to Zimbabwe and I met him at the service station, what we call a garage in South Africa, the fellow could not even look me in the eye. So I realized that whatever he'd attempted, it failed.
All right, can we please give them a breather? So that we can space, defense space, defense space, recupera space, defense space, recupera space. Right. Okay. When you are ready. Judges, Sapayok. Judges, Sapayok. Thank you. The biggest stop, listen, Sapa, no problem. The biggest stop on bikes, bring your bikes. Guidance, you ain't gonna. The biggest stop on bikes. Alright. Brali, Alisa Mai Sapayok, Liama Honam, please. Please find the members staying inside and Akari bike, you can join us, coordinate. Sapayok,
Most people think that bikers don't have any fears, but to the contrary, each and every biker has his own fears. Let me speak for myself. My biggest fear is that when I take my bike for service, after service and when I'm riding it, I'm not sure if the mechanic who was working on my bike did a good job or not. The fear, it doesn't just emanate from the blue, but it's because of previous experiences. At one stage, when I went to took my bike for service, they swapped the forks and replaced them with old forks from another different bike, and the shocks and everything. And then at another point, I had my fuel tank swapped again, and now my fuel gauge is malfunctioning. So I would like to appeal to service providers to be more professional and put the lives of bikers first ahead of profit. We need good service. We need to stay alive. We need to enjoy our rides without any fear or hindrance. That's my appeal to our service providers, our mechanics in particular. My primary goal was to see how long it would take me to ride to Gweru, Zimbabwe. And after attaining that and getting all the satisfaction that I received, I had to find other means to be back at Korea, where I started the whole episode. The question is, why is bike riding the ultimate ride? In my humble opinion, it's all about experiencing the wheel rotate about the axle and revolve around bends and curves, just like the earth rotates about its axis and revolve around the sun. For the biker, the tilting that you observe when you glide past other vehicles or when you glide around a curve, that's like revolving around the sun, and you are constantly watching your wheels rotate. And it is that connection that you find between the rider and his mother earth, and also the sun, which is a god to other people and other tribes. So that in itself gives riding the most pleasure one can think of. Others will even go to the extent of wheeling and marking the tarmac in a perfect circle, with a permanent black mark. And that's it. But how does it develop in us? Look at my son Taropa Fatswa and his colleagues, as they race the wheel. That leaves a lasting impression, and most riders will tell you that they had that experience when they were still growing up. I am proud of my longest drive, not because I'm the best there is, but because my ancestors had a part in it, and that I had pushed myself to the limit, and I'd managed to go all the way. So that makes me very glad, and only bikers will understand that.